Hey everyone, I'm Vladimir Dutier. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. These monitors are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates around the country. If there is news breaking out there, we're going to spend the next hour going through it with our correspondents, analysts, and anchors. Let's begin. It is 10 a.m., and that means it is the latest deadline for the Trump administration to hand over details to a federal judge about the Venezuelan deportation flights. But will the DOJ comply? That's the big question. We'll have answers. And Elon Musk is at the Pentagon right now. Why the defense secretary invited him and what we know about his visit. Plus, global travel chaos. London's Heathrow Airport is entirely shut down today. We're going to have details about a fire that knocked power out and the domino effect that's had on flights all around the world. You're probably affected too. This is CBS News 24/7. A new deadline for the Department of Justice to provide a federal judge with information about last weekend's deportation flights has come and gone. The flights carried hundreds of Venezuelan nationals to El Salvador. The Trump administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport 137 of them. But a federal court judge says the flights violated a temporary restraining order demanding the flights return to the U.S. The DOJ handed a late court filing to Judge James Boasberg yesterday. The judge called it woefully insufficient. He demanded more information be delivered this morning ahead of a hearing later this afternoon. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane has more details from Washington. So, Scott, again, just for our audience to understand, what happened and what can the judge do in order to hold whoever was responsible for this deportation accountable?
Unequivocally, Vlad, this is a potentially landmark standoff that's unfolding before our eyes. The Department of Justice didn't miss a deadline from this federal judge. They've missed a series of deadlines day after day from this judge. And if you don't like a judge's order, you can't simply disobey it or disregard it. You appeal it. That's not quite what's happening in this case. So you have this showdown this afternoon, midday in Washington, where the judge has called at least some members of the Department of Justice to appear before him to answer some questions. Now, he has had a series of questions about those deportations last Saturday. When did the planes take off? When did they clear U.S. airspace? When did they land? He hasn't gotten answers to those questions. He's gotten arguments from the Department of Justice why they don't believe they should answer those questions. The Chief Judge James Boasberg, longtime figure in the Washington, D.C. federal courthouse, not a household name, but in the legal circles, he is a famous name. And he recognizes the significance of what's happening here. This is the front line of a standoff between the administration and the federal courts, and we are going to see how he carries it this afternoon at the next hearing.
We were talking about this earlier, Scott, on the set of CBS Mornings between us. In years past, for example, governors have rejected orders from the federal government. Most famously, during the segregation fights of the 1960s, the president of the United States was able to order National Guard troops to allow students to enter schools. But in this case, this is the federal government rejecting a justice's order. And so the question becomes, what is that mechanism? In the case of the 1950s and 60s, the president could do something. Here, it is the president who's rejecting these orders.
That's a good question, and I don't want to understate the significance of these deportations of 200-plus Venezuelan nationals, a particularly important moment in itself. But this has become so much bigger and wider than just that issue. This is a fundamental face-off between two branches of government that has the potential to become destabilized. We don't know what's going to happen next. The judge kind of set the table last night in the court docket for a possible contempt finding against somebody inside the Department of Justice. But that is a provocative notion, no matter what's been happening in this case, Vlad, because you know who signed their name to these filings for the Department of Justice? The U.S. Attorney General herself, the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, the number 3 official, Emil Bove, and the Chief of Staff of the Department of Justice. These are not low-ranking line prosecutors. This is the Department of Justice. It's not clear what happens next, and that's why this is such a fascinating and potentially important hearing today. It's the first step into finding out what's next.
All right, Scott MacFarlane for us, reporting from Washington. Scott, thank you very much. And breaking this morning, CBS News has obtained an internal government list of those Venezuelan men who were deported to El Salvador over the weekend. The White House claims they are all violent gang members. That's what they claim. But the record suggests that that may not be true. So let's bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez, who broke that story for us. So first of all, what did the record show?
Well, the records contains the name of 238 Venezuelan nationals deported to El Salvador last weekend and imprisoned there in that country as part of this mass deportation operation that the Trump administration has been orchestrating. The records themselves do not show whether or not they have criminal histories in the U.S., but we do know from a sworn declaration by an ICE official in federal court, Vlad, that many of the people sent to El Salvador do not have criminal histories in the U.S. Some do, but many do not, according to this ICE official. But they're all being accused, Vlad, of being part of this notorious transnational gang, Tren de Aragua, that originated in Venezuela's prisons. However, lawyers and relatives of the deportees are contesting those allegations and are saying that their family members are non-criminals and that they are not gang members. And that is really at the center of this story, the question of due process, because people are saying that even if these people are alleged gang members, they should have had a day in court in the U.S. to contest those charges and to be able to fight those accusations from the government. They did not get that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad you honed in on that point, Camilo, because on one hand, you've got the government claiming one thing, that these members are members of a violent gang. One in particular's family members say they are not. So we have due process in this country. And again, people need to understand that due process applies to everyone, not just American citizens, right? So
including people who are here illegally. Yes.
Including people who are here illegally. And so the fact that this gentleman, the one that you focused on in particular, was not able to get his day in court, this is unprecedented.
And the law that the administration is citing to carry out these deportations dates back to 1798, the Alien Enemies Act, and it allows the government to do just that, to summarily arrest, detain, and deport individuals from nations that are orchestrating an invasion or an incursion into the U.S. The administration is arguing that Tren de Aragua is orchestrating that so-called invasion or incursion of the U.S., and that any suspected gang member from Venezuela can be summarily arrested and deported without any of the due process protections outlined in U.S. immigration law. The only criteria that the government has to satisfy to now deport people under this proclamation is that they have to find that the men are 14 or older, that they're Venezuelan, that they lack U.S. citizenship or permanent residency, and that they are allegedly part of this gang. And allegedly is the key word here, Vlad.
Okay, you've got some new reporting as well about migrant detainee flights to Guantanamo. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so last week, the migrant holding facilities at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, were emptied out by the Trump administration, and the detainees being held there were sent to a staging area in Louisiana to be deported from there. But now we have learned that flights of migrant detainees to Guantanamo Bay have resumed. Indeed, yesterday, we are told by U.S. officials, one military aircraft transported about 21 migrant detainees to Cuba, to the naval base there, and we are told that more flights are on the way this week as well. So this operation, of course, is fulfilling that promise made by President Trump to convert the naval base there into a massive detention center to hold as many as 30,000 people, even though the number of detainees has not reached that point at all.
Fascinating. Camilo Montoya Galvez, thank you very much for coming by.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. All right, in less than 1 hour, President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth are scheduled to deliver remarks from the Oval Office. Hegseth has teased a big announcement for the Department of Defense. Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman to talk more about this. So what do we know about this big announcement, Willie James?
Hey there, Vlad. Good morning to you. We know that this announcement will include an announcement by the President and the Secretary of Defense to talk about 6th-generation fighter jets, a contract that will be awarded to produce those fighter jets. This, of course, comes after a morning meeting between the Secretary of Defense and Elon Musk.
All right, so these remarks are also coming as you mentioned Elon Musk there in your remarks, who is visiting the Pentagon this morning. Why is the Department of Government Efficiency involved in anything defense related?
Yeah, it's a good question, Vlad. There was some reporting late last night about this meeting with Musk being at the Pentagon, as you see him arriving there earlier this morning, that he was potentially set to receive a briefing on secret war plans against a potential war against China, I should say. Now, the White House is disputing that. Not only is the Secretary of Defense disputing that, he said in a tweet, the fake news delivers again. He says this meeting is not a meeting about top secret China war plans. It's an informal meeting about innovation. And the president also chimed in on this as well. He put a post out on Truth Social, essentially blasting this New York Times reporting and saying that this is not the case. He went on to say, I think we have that for our viewers as well. He went on to say, calling the fake news the enemy of the people, and said Elon is not being briefed on anything China by the Department of War. I will point out that the U.S. Department of Defense hasn't been the Department of War since 1947. So the president giving a pretty antiquated name there to the Department of Defense, but saying that Elon Musk will not be briefed on any top secret war plans. We anticipate the president and the Secretary of Defense to speak before cameras live at 11 a.m. in the Oval Office, Vlad.
All right, Willie James Inman for us this morning. Thank you very much. If you are scheduled to travel in and out of Heathrow Airport in London today, you are out of luck. The airport says it will remain closed all day because of a fire at a nearby electrical substation. Fire is now under control, but it did knock out power to thousands of homes and businesses, and it is causing some major travel disruptions. I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Ian Lee, who's following this for us. So, Ian, I know it's still early in the investigation, but any word on what caused the fire?
Investigators are looking into that, and they want to get answers quickly, Vlad. So they brought in the Counterterrorism Command, not because they believe there's been foul play, but they have the specialists, the resources, and the capabilities to quickly pinpoint the cause of the fire and to limit any further disruption. But right now, getting that airport up and running again, finding out the cause of the fire, those are the two main things they're trying to do.
How does Heathrow's closure impact other travelers around the world, Ian?
Yeah, Vlad, hundreds of thousands of people travel through Heathrow on a daily basis. About 1,300 flights it operates. And so there is a lot of disruption, as you can imagine. 120 planes had to turn back. One passenger described what the pilot told them.
We went 3 hours over and 3 hours back, so the flight was the same amount of time. I just didn't end up where I wanted to be.
Left on time, everything was good. I was sleeping, and the pilot came on and said that some of us may have noticed the plane was turning around, and not to be alarmed, but that London Heathrow was closed due to a fire.
About 500 flights to and from the United States have been affected. And again, authorities are hoping that they can get it open as quickly as possible.
And so, yeah, I mean, the question, of course, Ian, is that flights not just in Britain or even in Europe, but even in the United States and around the world are being affected by this airport closure. Have you had any reporting on frustrated passengers or even folks from Heathrow Airport with a statement?
Well, Heathrow is, staying on top of this. We're hearing that they have 2 out of the 4 terminals have electricity. Officials are saying that they hope that the airport will be open again tomorrow. They are staying on top of this. Passengers clearly frustrated. This isn't something that you expect. I was speaking with one person who said they dropped off a family at the airport at 3 in the morning today, and that they quickly realized the airport wasn't open. And so, the frustration, we say 200,000 people fly in and out of Heathrow, roughly that many on a daily basis. That is that many individual stories of frustration today, Vlad.
All right, Ian Lee reporting from Heathrow Airport this morning for us. Thank you so much, Ian. Crews in South Florida are working to contain a wildfire that shut down the roads leading in and out of the Florida Keys. The brush fire erupted on Tuesday, forcing authorities to close down the 18-mile stretch of US 1. The National Weather Service has issued fire watch alerts along the eastern Florida coast, stretching from the Keys to the Orlando area. So let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with the first look at the national forecast. Hey, Tammy.
Well, good morning to you, Vlad. Yeah, let's take a look nationwide. First of all, at what we're dealing with as far as all of these fire weather watches. We do have fires that are ongoing. You can see them in Florida and Louisiana and even over into Texas. But, we'll focus on the ones that we have going here in Florida. Now, these are the watches and the warnings, the fire watches, the fire warnings. A lot of them out west. That's to be expected. But people forget that this is the dry season in Florida. And this is typically the time of year when you would see some of these fires going on in Florida. So that is something that we're watching very, very closely. And we're going to continue to watch places like Orlando, down to Miami and into the Keys. That's where we're seeing all of this fire danger. What we're also watching for is the humidity, because today we are going to have fairly low humidity going on. In fact, the humidity is going to be somewhere between 20 and 40%, which for Florida on the ocean is very, very dry. Now, when I come back in a few minutes, we'll talk about the fire weather for the weekend, and we'll talk about the next storm system that is going to go coast to coast. Vlad?
All right, Tammy, thank you very much. The number of measles cases continues to grow in Texas. Coming up, we'll show you the mobile clinic effort underway as the state looks to control the outbreak. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Sudan's presidential palace has apparently been seized by the country's army. You're looking at some footage of a Sudanese television reporter in front of the palace in Khartoum as army soldiers celebrate behind him. They've captured it today from a paramilitary group which took control of the palace in April of 2023. They're calling it one of the most symbolic gains in the years-long conflict. Meanwhile, over in the Middle East, a judge in Israel has blocked Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's firing of the country's top intelligence official. It comes amid growing protest over the collapse of a ceasefire in Gaza and what it could mean for final hostage negotiations. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is reporting from Tel Aviv this morning. So, Ramy, the Israeli army announced this morning that it will expand its ground offensive in Gaza. How intensive is that going to be? And I guess all hopes for a second phase ceasefire are rapidly fading.
It definitely appears that way over the past 4 days, Vlad. After what Israel Katz said, the defense minister, he's now threatening a major escalation. He's now ordered the IDF to seize more areas in the Strip and for troops to expand the security zones around Gaza. Those apparently were outlined earlier this week in maps and flyers that the IDF dropped. Katz is also warning that strikes will intensify even more than we've seen in the past 4 days. From early Tuesday, those initial barrages of strikes killing an estimated 600 people or so over these 4 days. The new strikes from the air, sea, and land, he says. And he also says that it could pressure Gazans to move south. And remember, over the past 2 months, over the ceasefire, thousands, tens of thousands of people moved back north. So imagine the flow back south if this were to happen. And he says they could even start the transfer of residents out of Gaza if anyone wants to. This is a voluntary basis. But of course, that's based on President Trump's proposal. We know that's controversial. Katz says, though, that it's about the hostages, 59 dead and alive from what we understand. He says the more that Hamas refuses to release them, the more territory it will lose to Israel.
So let me ask you about the firing of the head of Shin Bet, the intelligence organization. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this has been rapidly developing since last night. The new development just in the past hour or so is that the Shin Bet chief isn't out of a job just yet. Israel's High Court issued a temporary injunction on his firing just now. They'll hear petitions over the next 2 weeks. But I think put this into the broader context of Israeli politics. His dismissal last night was unprecedented. This is the first time that the head of the country's internal intelligence services, some compare this to the FBI, has ever been fired. His name, Ronen Bar, a cabinet fired him in a unanimous vote. Netanyahu said that he had just lost faith in him and that his allies accused him for the failures, the security failures of October 7th. Specifically, they say that he received intel the night before, but he didn't act on it. But on the flip side, got to say that Bar was leading a probe into Netanyahu. So that raises eyebrows as well. He was leading this high-profile corruption probe into the influence of Qatar into the prime minister's office. So Netanyahu front and center there. But critics of Netanyahu say that he's trying to save his own skin by firing the Shin Bet chief and then potentially installing someone who's a friend.
Wow. All right, Ramy Inocencio reporting from Tel Aviv for us this morning. Thanks, Ramy. We are expecting some new numbers from the deadly measles outbreak in Texas this morning. It comes as 2 new cases were also confirmed in Maryland. The outbreak has now spread to 15 states. CBS News reporter Karen Hua is in Houston this morning for us to talk more about this. So, Karen, for our viewers who may not have been tracking this story, which is going back a couple of weeks now, what is the situation currently in Texas as it relates to measles?
So good morning, Vlad. Yeah, unfortunately, we've been told by healthcare officials it's going to get worse before it gets better. The latest numbers we have from the Texas Department of Health as of March 18th is that there have been 279 confirmed cases of measles in the state since late January. They say at least 36 of those people have been hospitalized, and the CDC says 95% of the people who've contracted measles are all unvaccinated. The one death we know that's been from measles in the state of Texas was a young child who was also unvaccinated. Vlad?
So, Karen, you also got a firsthand look at one of the ways the state is attempting to fight the outbreak. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Vlad, we got this inside look at the Texas Children's Mobile Clinic. There currently have been no cases reported here in Houston, in Harris County, and so officials are really trying to keep it that way. This mobile clinic is basically an RV that has 2 doctors' clinics that are built into it, and it drives around to these often low-income or underserved neighborhoods, really trying to meet the need where it is. So not only can you get different types of vaccines, shots at these mobile clinics, but also you can just go in for any symptoms if you're unsure about what it is you have. And the idea of this is that everything should be free, low cost. It's ideal for families who may not have health insurance or those who might have transportation issues getting to a regular hospital or doctor, really any barriers. We did get to talk to the medical director of this mobile clinic. This is what she had to say about this growing need, especially with the measles outbreak. Talk about this demand.
So the demand is huge, and the families are so patient and so loving, and they will wait for our services. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have a lot of people that come up to this walk-in clinic, and we'll have 20, 30 families waiting, and the families are there. They will wait for us, and we will get to them one at a time and provide them all of the services that they need.
You say sometimes as long as 2 or 3 hours.
They can easily sometimes wait 2 or 3 hours to see us.
And what do they tell you? If it weren't for this mobile clinic, where else would they go?
So we have actually surveyed and asked our families many times over the years. I've been working on the clinic for 15 years. They tell us that we wouldn't have gone anywhere. And so we really are providing a unique and genuine service to this community.
So Dr. Mishra really says, check your records to see if you've gotten the measles vaccine. But if you're unsure, it's not bad to get that extra booster dose as well. Back to you, Vlad.
Yeah, all of this, though, as you know, Karen, could have been prevented by folks getting vaccinated against this disease that had been eradicated in the States 20 years ago. All right, Karen Hua for us. Thank you for your reporting. Appreciate it. Coming up, Mahmoud Khalil's wife speaks out about the moment she saw ICE agents take her husband away. That interview coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. In Florida, a Southwest Airlines plane almost took off from a taxiway. Officials say the crew mistook the taxiway for the runway at Orlando International Airport. This happened yesterday morning. Air traffic controllers managed to stop the plane and cancel its clearance before takeoff in response to the incident. Southwest said it moved the passengers to a different plane. It added nothing is more important than the safety of its passengers and crew. The FAA and the NTSB are investigating. New York State has been given another month to end its congestion pricing program. In New York City, the Trump administration initially said the state had until today to end the tolls, but gave Governor Kathy Hochul a 30-day extension. She has stood firm in maintaining congestion pricing despite pressure from the administration and critics. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy wrote on social media, Hochul's, quote, continued noncompliance will not be taken lightly. Right now, Governor Hochul is giving an update on the ongoing battle. Let's watch on CBS News, New York.
Is up and crime is down. And we're very graphic is yes indeed. So I want to say this. It's been a long journey. We're still on that journey. And the more people who get a chance to see the benefits, just walk around and talk to people, ask if their lives are more enriched, whether they have more time with their families if they're a commuter, whether or not they're finally realizing that we have the world-class public transit system, but we need to keep it world-class by raising the revenues to invest in it as well. That is essential. So, today's an important day. The cameras are staying on. And cameras are staying on. The cameras are staying on. The cameras are staying on. The cameras are staying on.
Cameras stay on. That is New York Governor Kathy Hochul there in front of some supporters talking about congestion pricing. You can see folks holding signs behind her, traffic down, businesses up. I can tell you that coming into the city every morning, we get here at 4:30 in the morning, and it is empty compared to what it was before congestion pricing. The Trump administration has extended the deadline for New York to end the program in 30 days. We'll see if that happens. The governor has promised to take the Trump administration to court over the future of congestion pricing. All right, we've been following the case of Mahmoud Khalil. He is the former Columbia University graduate student who was detained on accusations of spreading Hamas propaganda. He remains in an ICE facility in Louisiana. Khalil's wife spoke to our Erin Moriarty in her first TV interview since his arrest and recounted the moment he was placed in handcuffs.
My husband was taken away from me in the middle of the night. It was one of the most terrifying times of my life. I don't think I've ever experienced anything scarier than that. And we get to our apartment door. We were unlocking the door, and a man comes up behind us and holds the door open. So he was like, "Are you Mahmoud Khalil?" Mahmoud said yes. And the man said, "We're with the police. You have to come with us."
What's going through your mind at that point?
I was scared. I was terrified. But at this point, Mahmoud was like, "Go take the keys, grab my green card." He thought maybe like if he shows the green card, we'll be fine.
CBS News legal reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman joins me now here in Studio 55. So we're still waiting on this case to be heard in New Jersey. What are you hearing as the latest?
So, yeah, Vlad, that's exactly it. We're waiting for them to set a court hearing in New Jersey because that's where everything is going to be decided now. Khalil is still in this detention center in Louisiana. His attorneys want him moved. So this judge will get to decide if he can be moved to New Jersey. He also has a motion on bail and his habeas corpus motion to be released altogether. But we're starting to hear from his wife, as we just heard. He also, a couple days ago, released his first public statement where he talked about what this experience has been like for him and how he recognizes that this is bigger than him, that this is a crackdown by the Trump administration on dissent, but that he just hopes that he will be home in time for his first child, because when he was arrested, his wife was 8 months pregnant.
A court blocked also the deportation of a Georgetown University researcher. You and I talked about that yesterday. What did the judge say in the ruling?
So the judge says, like with Mahmoud Khalil, that the government cannot deport this researcher until the court has decided that that should be done, because there's also been a writ of habeas corpus filed in that case for his release. So she wants to make sure that he stays in this country until the court makes a decision on that. He's also been brought to Louisiana, just like Mahmoud Khalil, and they want him brought back to Virginia, where he's from.
All right, and another case you've been following, a jury has convicted two men of planning to assassinate an Iranian-American journalist. What do you know about that?
So this is a fascinating case, Vlad. It was an Iranian-directed plot, prosecutors say, to kill an Iranian dissident. She's an activist and journalist. She's been a leader of the women's rights movement in Iran, a strong critic of the government, at her home here in Brooklyn. And just yesterday, two men were found guilty. They could face decades in prison. One of the charges comes with up to life in prison. I spoke with her right after the verdict, and she was just breaking down in tears of joy, although she also says that she recognizes while she's relieved that these men are going to be in prison now, the real masterminds behind this plot, she said, are still at large because that is the Iranian government. And they have continued, even after the assassination attempt that was just on trial, to kill her. Even as recently as this past fall, there was a man who was tasked with both assassinating her and assassinating Donald Trump. He was arrested, but that's what an important asset or person she is to the Iranian regime.
Has she been named or is she remaining anonymous?
Oh, no, she's been named. It's Masih Alinejad. She's a very prominent activist.
So in the case of these two men, they're not American citizens?
No, they're affiliated with the Russian mob, and they were hired, prosecutors say, by Iran.
Prime candidates for deportation, as opposed to university professors, you would think.
That is very true. That's an excellent point, Vlad.
All right, Katrina Kaufman breaking it down for us as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Russian drones have hit Odessa, Ukraine, igniting massive fires overnight. This comes after President Trump expressed optimism for peace talks that are expected to resume in a few days. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky responded to the attack, saying in part joint pressure on Russia by way of sanctions and defense support is the way to stop them. Let's bring in Brian Taylor. He is the director of the Moynihan Institute of Global Affairs at the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Good morning, Vlad.
So new talks are scheduled between Russia and Ukraine next week. What realistically can we expect to come out of them?
Well, it's a curious situation in that both the Russian and Ukrainian delegations are going to be in Saudi Arabia to meet with the American delegation. It doesn't seem they're actually going to meet directly with each other. So the Americans are probably going to be shuttling between the two sides. And what they're hoping to agree on is what the terms of this stop to air targeting of energy and other infrastructure amounts to. And Russia wants it to just be energy infrastructure. Ukraine wants it to be strikes on all infrastructure. And so there's a bit of a disagreement in the details there.
So it's remarkable that Russia wants the United States to stop military aid. They want the Ukrainians to stand down. Meanwhile, there's no pressure being put on the Russians to do anything. Would the Ukrainians agree to that?
Well, I think the Ukrainians really would like a broader ceasefire at this point. At least President Zelensky agreed to that. Remember that the discussion last week was about, or 2 weeks ago, was about a ceasefire across the board. Then it was air and sea. Now they're concentrating on air, but maybe talking about sea and Saudi Arabia. But I think your basic point is right, that so far most of the pressure seems to be on the Ukrainians to make concessions and very little pressure on the Russians to make bigger concessions, given that they're the party that started the war.
And where is NATO and the European Union in all of this?
Well, this is an interesting part of this story because as the United States seems to be stepping back from supporting Ukraine and in some sense moving closer to the Russian position, the Europeans are trying to come together and step up and support Ukraine in a more determined fashion. But there are questions about whether they can come to unity on that and whether they have all the military means that they would need to provide that support if it comes down to it.
Fascinating. Brian Taylor, thank you as always, my friend. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Vlad.
All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Tammy Sousa with another look at the national forecast. Tammy.
Well, hello there, Vlad. Yeah, let's take a look first at what is going on nationwide. We've got a couple of things to talk about here. First of all, we have got our current fire weather. It's very, very dry. So up and down the plains from the central, especially into the southern plains and over into New Mexico, we are looking at fire danger for today. This is where it's going to be elevated, although we still have that fire danger taking place into parts of Florida. And then we're looking at also the drought conditions that are out there. We have had endless drought that has been going on out there. And what we're looking at is that drought worsening in those areas that we have the fire danger. So you're talking about Texas and New Mexico. And then even over into Florida, that is where we have the drought conditions and they have those fires that are ongoing there. This extends well on up into the Northeast. So this is going to be a problem as we head into the weekend. Now, the one thing that we are hoping for is some rain. How about that? That would be lovely, wouldn't it? Well, We're going to get a little bit of rain this weekend, not a lot. There is another Clipper system comes into the northeast, brings a little bit of rain, just a shot of rain, and then another system that will cross from the west coast through the Midwest with snow into the upper Midwest and bring rain on Monday to the East Coast. So for the most part, we are not going to get relief from the drought, and that means we're still going to see those large areas of fire danger, which is a very, very big problem. Let's talk about your weekend weather, because we have temperatures that are going to be all over the place. We're going to start out with cooler temperatures if we are in the places that are in the south. Like, look at this, in Dallas and places into Texas, Louisiana, you're normal or below normal. Then we go up into the northeast, where we're going to be looking at temperatures that are going to be slightly above average, and then you have temperatures across the northern plains that are above average. Places like Chicago will be 11 degrees above average today, but look at tomorrow. You got cold air coming in, and we're going to be below average by 7 degrees, only 39 tomorrow in Chicago. And then the temperature bounces back up. Places like New York and Philadelphia, we get a bounce. By the time we get into Sunday, you got it, things start to turn downward again for the northern tier states and into the northeast. But look at all of you then in Dallas. You're warming into the 80s, well above average. Vlad?
All right, exciting stuff. Tammy, thank you very much. Frustration is growing from inside the Democratic Party over Senator Chuck Schumer's leadership. We'll dig into the mounting calls for him to step aside and how he's responding to the pressure. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We've watched an outcry from energized voters at town halls nationwide, some calling on Democratic lawmakers to fight the Trump administration's policies, but many are also calling into question Democratic leadership of Senator Chuck Schumer. California Representative Mike Levin spoke about the dissent in the Democratic Party on America Decides. Listen to this.
I can tell you that there was profound disappointment across the House Democratic caucus, and it surely was not left versus right or anything like that. It was just those of us that think that now is the time to fight versus those that were willing to go along.
Let us bring in CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small, who's joining me now to talk more about this. So Torian, it's a question I've been asking to everyone who covers the Hill. He used Senator Schumer to pressure from the far left members of his party, but now this is coming from some of his closest allies, moderate Democrats. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, certainly not something that he expected when he took on the leadership mantle. Some of his closest allies, like you mentioned, Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker Emeritus, also a close connection to him when it comes to countering Trump's agenda in the first term, came out and said she wouldn't give anything for nothing in response to Schumer's handling of that continuing resolution. A lot of the backlash we're hearing vocally and very publicly is from members of the Progressive Caucus in both chambers. But like you said, this is something coming from Democrats in both chambers, no matter where they lie on the political spectrum. And Schumer has to come to terms with the fact that his decision-making so far under this new term, under the second term for Donald Trump, has been viewed as weak compared to what activists, to what voters, what his constituents have been calling for, which is a stronger presence from Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's been around for a long time, Senator Schumer. Pressure from the far left of his party. It also bedeviled Nancy Pelosi when she was House Speaker. She was able to survive that. I'm guessing Schumer will probably survive this, but we'll see how it all breaks down. Torian Small for us, reporting from the Hill. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. If you work a long shift, you can expect overtime. Well, for the 2 Starliner astronauts who spent extra months in space, OT is not on the table. Sorry, guys. Everybody in here is in a union. They're all mad about it. But astronauts aren't in a union, I don't think. Instead, Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore will return to Earth as they did earlier this week. And NASA says the astronauts on the ISS do not get overtime, holiday, or weekend pay. But they get to go to space, right? And they get you want to know what the per diem is? $5 a day.
What?
Yeah, I hope the audience can hear the reaction from the crew in the studio. They get $5 a day per diem, which is a lot less than all of you get, on top of their salaries. That adds up to about 1,400 big ones each. Don't spend it all in one place, I guess. Even you guys make more on per diems. Yeah, the peanut gallery is killing me. Oh, my God, the consternation. All right, let's talk about March Madness. It wouldn't be March Madness without some upsets, and we already have some potential bracket busters. 12-seeded McNeese State shocked 5th seed Clemson to advance to the next round, and Drake University, he beat all those lawsuits. Jaleel got it. No, I'm talking about Drake University. 6th seed Missouri out. CBS News Miami sports anchor Mike Cunio has a preview of today's action.
Welcome into CBS Center Court. I'm Mike Cunio, and if you're like me, you've been poring over your bracket already. I've got a few losses, but I'm feeling pretty good because the Gators, they're still at the top, and they're actually going to play later today. Now, here's what we got in terms of big matchups going into Friday. We got 2 number 1 seeds playing. We got the Florida Gators, and we got the Duke Blue Devils. Let's start with Florida, the winners of the SEC tournament. They're going to take on Norfolk State later today. Now, these two have some tournament history. They met way back in 2012. Florida handled that game way back then. Now, in terms of what's to look for Duke when they take on Mount St. Mary's, Duke has won 8 straight opening round games in the tournament. They want to push it to 9 straight. Of course they do. And guess what? They're going to get a little extra helping hand here. Their star freshman, Cooper Flagg, has been activated for this game. Remember, he hurt his ankle in the ACC tournament and missed the last couple of games. So Cooper Flagg, active, good to go. Now, let's talk about a game with some historical context to it. We got UConn and Oklahoma. The Huskies have won the last 2 national championships. They want to make it 3 in a row, but first they have to get through not 1, but likely 2 SEC teams to do it. First, they've got that matchup against the Sooners today, but if they get through Oklahoma, Dan Hurley and company more than likely also have to get past the red-hot Florida Gators in the round of 32. That's going to do it here from Center Court. I'm Mike Cunio.
All right, Mike, thanks very much. That does it for me, folks. Stay right where you are. Mugo Odiwe, live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.